Okay, we're now live. A number of us are today on the screen. I'm advised that we will not be quorum today, so any matters that come forward from this meeting today will go to the full board for signing off. Those, I understand, are the arrangements. Are there any apologies for absence? I've had a couple identified. Obviously, Councillor Brookfield is indisposed, and by the way, we do wish him well. Andy, of course, is away. Andy Street, Anita Barber, I've got, and Stuart Croft. Any more, please?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Lee Barron, but we have the substitute, Rob Johnson, who's joining us online.
So Lee Barron, Rob Johnson substituting. Thank you for that. Any other indications on the screen anyone wishes to indicate? No. Okay. For my benefit, if for no one else, can we just quickly go around the room so we do know who's who, particularly people who are presenting reports. So I'm Councillor Bob Slay, I'm the Deputy Mayor, and on this occasion, thanks to Councillor Ward, I'm chairing this meeting. Thank you.
Hi, Matthew Rhodes. I'm here as Chair of the West Midlands Industrial Energy Task Force to give you an interim report on our progress.
Can we use the microphones, please?
Thank you, Bob. Jonathan Skinner, Head of Economic Policy and Partnerships at the Combined Authority.
Katie Trout, Director of Policy and Partnerships at West Midlands Growth Company.
Neil Rami, West Midlands Growth Company.
Paul Edwards, Head of Economic Development at the Combined Authority.
Ian Ward, Leader, Birmingham City Council.
Fiona Aldridge, Head of Insight, Combined Authority. Claire Hatton, Director of Employment and Skills, Combined Authority.
Joe Buckingham, Policy Officer, Combined Authority.
Adam Govan, Director of Regeneration at Sandwell Council.
Councillor Peter Hughes, Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Growth, Sandwell Council.
Good afternoon, Andy Newman, Director of Legacy, Birmingham City Council.
Andrew Lovett, Chair of the Combined Authority Tourism Advisory Board and Chief Executive of the Black Country Living Museum.
Becky Paul, West Midlands Growth Company, supporting the Tourism and Hospitality Advisory Board.
Councillor David Stanley, Dudley Metropolitan Borough Council, and I am the Cabinet Member for Regeneration.
I'm Tom Westley, Deputy Chair of this board and on the board of the West Midlands Growth Company and currently Black Country LEP. Yeah.
Nugent,
Can we turn the mics off once you've spoken? Okay, we'll move into the formal agenda. The first item of apologies is declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest that they have in any item being discussed during the course of the meeting. In addition, the receipt of any gift or hospitality should be declared where the value of it was thought to exceed £25 for gifts or £40 for hospitality. Are there any declarations of interest?
Chairman.
Councillor Ward.
I would like to declare an interest in respect of the West Midlands Growth Company. It's a non-pecuniary interest. I'm a member of the board, and I'd like some advice in respect of item 9 on today's agenda. There's reference in item 9 and indeed a request for funding for the European Athletics Championships 2026, of which the City of Birmingham is the host. So do I need to declare a non-pecuniary interest in respect of that?
Seek to advise. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll note it by certainly. Yeah.
Okay, I will declare that non-pecuniary interest then in respect of the European Athletics Championships in the future.
I think to be safe, we'll do that. That's fine. Thank you.
I did already mention that I'm on the board of the West Midlands Growth Company, so that needs to be recorded.
We'll do so as well. Thank you, Tom, for that. Any on the screen? I can't see any hands on the screen that indicate anything at this stage. Okay. A couple of remarks from me in my position as chair. Can I welcome Councillor David Stanley, the new EGB rep for WMBC, as a result of Councillor Simon Phipps standing down from his cabinet role due to work commitments. And although LEP integration is on the agenda, as part of my prerogative, I think it's the last EGB before LEP functions reintegrate into the Combined Authority. And I therefore want to thank the LEP representatives who served this board well over a period of time and clearly hope that the future brings something positive for them as well. So thank you. In the last 10 years, I think some of us have been together. So. We therefore move on to the minutes of the meeting of the 2nd of December, which have been previously circulated. I'm just seeking an approval for them as a true record. Are there any points of clarification or corrections that need to be made? Councillor Hughes, please.
Well, Chair, there was a lot of discussion around the West Midlands Growth Company, and I really do believe there's no reflection in the commentary here relating to the need for an independent review. And I'm sure that was mentioned by more than one of us during the course of the last meeting. And there was also a comment made about there was an element of marking their own homework, so to speak. So that's not reflected in these minutes, and I think it needs to be rectified to take account of the views of people at that meeting.
We'll make a note of that, Councillor Hughes. Thank you. Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you. It's in respect of minute number 25 and the economic data that's presented. There was, well, it's me, I asked for this actually. The Executive Director for Economic Delivery Skills and Communities undertook that she would bring a report to a future meeting setting out this data in more detail, i.e. down to a lower level. I just wondered when we might be receiving that.
Thank you. So we are having a presentation today. There's a paper that talks about some of the labour market information at a more localised level. The economic data that we get in the dashboard, a lot of that isn't available on a regular basis. We will commit to doing that in future.
Okay, fine.
Sorry, Chair.
Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, Chair, I did miss one other point. It does say that in the review of the growth company there was going to be a benchmarking exercise, and I can't see that in the report we have this afternoon. Is that going to be carried out?
Katie, please.
We have done some international benchmarking that we can talk through with you. We've done some look at international best practice from the OECD, and then we've also OCO Global has done a piece of benchmarking for us that I'm happy to talk through the headlines of. It doesn't feature in this report at the moment, but we do have the detail that we can provide.
Okay. We've noted your question and we've just put the response to that in the minutes. And thank you, Councillor Hughes. Okay, we therefore move on to item 5, which is the West Midlands Growth Plan. My list tells me that I have a number of people who are going to contribute to this quite clearly. I think it's led off by Paul Edwards, I believe. Is that right? Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. You'll all glad that I'm just the front man for this, and as people who know much more about this from me will be speaking shortly, but I just wanted to give a very brief overview of what's in this paper. There's the usual economic dashboard information, which I will shortly hand over to Delma Dwight to talk us through, but then we've brought to the board 2 particularly noteworthy challenges to the West Midlands economy at the moment around industrial energy, and we have Matthew Rowley with us today as chair of the West Midlands Industrial Task Force to talk to some of the work of his task force and the outcomes of that. And then around hospitality and tourism, we've got Andrew Lovett here to talk to us about some of the work of his board and some of the challenges for the sector going forwards. I'll quickly cover off and happy to take questions. First of all, the wider work around Plan for Growth, Chair, which really is to bring to the board's attention that there's some wider mobilisation going on, both within the CA and the wider West Midlands family, including the West Midlands Growth Company, around supporting that activity. And that would be an item that I will bring back to future economic growth on a standing basis. Take any questions on that. If not, I'll hand over to Delma.
Any questions on the first part or non-indicated? See, Delma, do you want to take over for us, please?
Thank you. Many thanks. Afternoon, everybody. Just to ensure that the dashboard's reflective of the most up-to-date data, you should have received an updated version of the dashboard with the data released this week, which was circulated to this board yesterday. And today I just wanted to draw your attention briefly to 3 key data sets which really sort of reflect the current economic performance we're seeing across the region, which, as you know, will continue. It is a mixed picture in a continued volatile economic environment. Firstly, if we look at the overall performance of the economy, the latest regional GDP figures show a quarter-on-quarter decrease of 0.3%. Nationally, the economy avoided going into recession, and the economy at England level remained flat at 0%, but we did see that small decline across the region. Not all sectors are declining. Positively, manufacturing reported a quarter-on-quarter rise of 4.9%, but we are seeing some falls in certain sectors across the region. When we look at the growth of our business base, we are still seeing, unfortunately, business debts outstripping business births, in contrast to earlier years where we used to have 3,000 more births than debts. We now have 3,000 less. Finally, in terms of tracking that West Midlands Business Activity Index, we see a very small rise from 48.9 up to 49 in January 2023. So we're below that critical 50 growth mark for the 6th consecutive month. But what is common, what we're seeing is, again, that mixed picture, with some firms lowering their output levels due to reduced new businesses, but others are reporting growth with sort of tentative signs of improvement in demand due to successful marketing efforts. And really positively, in terms of the outlook and the feeling across businesses across the Midlands, in terms of that sort of future business activity, where they're asked about where they see the future economy growing, actually the West Midlands region recorded the strongest overall optimism. So firms are optimistic that the next 12 months, with the investment, the new product launch, that sort of containing of inflation, even though we know it's still at a very high level, but that improvement in consumer demand, they feel, will continue to support business activity. That's it for me. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Any questions from Delma? The dashboard was circulated. I had one through this morning. Corin?
Hi, Delma. Great report as always, man. We've done 2 or 3 round tables lately with businesses for the local skills improvement plan, and almost every single business we've spoken to has highlighted they've got a bigger demand for their products or services than they can cope with, and the only thing holding them back at the moment is actually is as a workforce, and not even a skilled workforce, just a workforce at the moment. And it wasn't the type of conversation you'd expect to hear when the economy is so flat. So literally, I'd say literally 90-95% of the business we've spoken to have got growth, but they can't do it. Do you recognise that in some of the work you've been looking at?
Yeah, we're seeing, that really tight labour market, aren't they? There's a number of issues, and I'm sure Fiona will come on to them in paper number 6. So there are, but, as you said, that optimism is there. There's a sense of confidence when you talk to businesses. The consumer demand that's been constrained is starting to increase, but it's very different, as you know, depending on what sector you're talking to. In the report, we've had some recent closures. We know in particular visitor economy and some sectors have been hit really hard, some manufacturing firms, but then the more digital creative are seeing that growth. So yeah, it's definitely what we're seeing as well.
Want to come back, Corin? Okay. Anyone else wish to ask Delma anything at this point? Councillor Hughes?
Do we have any information as to the geographical spread of the insolvencies that you're talking about in 2.7, and also with the those firms that are really struggling with the energy prices? It's saying 1.4 of the West Midlands businesses account for over 50% of the non-domestic energy. Can you give us an indication as to where we would tend to find those 1.4%?
Thanks, Councillor.
Yeah, our neck of the woods, I think.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. Yes, certainly in relation to insolvencies, we can provide that information down to lower geography level. So I'll circulate that, and I wouldn't want to steal Matthew Rhodes's thunder. So I imagine Matthew will be in his next item, will be covering that 1.4%.
That's exactly it. Any more questions for Delma's part? I'm therefore going to, in that segue moment, pass over to Matthew, please, to give us the energy issues.
If I could just pick up that question as a starter. So we have a map, Councillor Hughes, and there's about 3,000 500 such businesses. That's the 1.4%. The bulk are in Birmingham and the Black Country, but we know exactly where they are. Okay, so in terms of my report, which was section 4, I think, of Paul's paper, this is a written report at the halfway point of the West Midlands Industrial Energy Task Force. It was deferred, in fact, we published an interim report in November or December, I think. But just a very brief background on the task force, but for everyone who doesn't know, it was set up last August by the Mayor and the Energy Minister, specifically to focus on the impact of energy costs on West Midlands energy exposed businesses. And it has a defined brief of reporting by next June, and the final report will clearly come back to this board at that point. So this is my kind of midterm report to you. In the paper, there's a graph which shows that energy costs have actually come back down in the last couple of months, actually, since late November, but they are still 2 to 4 times what they were for most of the last 20 years, in fact. So that is a big shock to the economy, particularly if you're in the manufacturing sector and depend on energy, probably 10 to 40% of the cost now, or in the hospitality sector is another big sector that's affected by this these trends. And there are the 2 reasons why businesses are still very affected by this. One is that fact that the prices are 2 to 4 times higher than they've always been. The other is the volatility that occurred for the whole of last year. And the bulk of businesses, I think the figure's about 75–80%, will be on fixed tariffs. So you get this kind of delayed effect. And there are a number of businesses who signed up to fixed tariffs at 60, 70, 80 pence per kilowatt hour, compared to a 20-year average of about 10p per kilowatt hour, just to give you an idea, in last autumn, who are now in deep trouble and can just see costs heading out for the rest of the year. So it remains a really serious issue. In terms of the task force itself, we're on track to give you a report by June, as promised. We spent the first couple of months gathering key data, like the data councillor who's referred to, about where this problem was, why the West Midlands was particularly badly affected. And we are probably the most vulnerable economy in the UK, and we have data to prove that now. So we built that case. We're now in an evidence gathering stage where we also identified the kind of key issues that we would look at and explore, and where we thought that the solutions might lie. We're in an evidence gathering phase at the moment, so we've got a series of focus groups or workshops with the target businesses across the region this month and next month. I can provide details of those if anyone wants them. And we'll be reporting on June, and there'll be recommendations that are very short-term focused, so financial support for vulnerable businesses, those kind of things. There'll be recommendations that are medium-term focused, regulatory changes that can be made, which I'll probably come back to, financial mechanisms and so on. And we will touch on longer-term things as well around infrastructure. However, that's too late. So we've recognised from the beginning that producing a written report next June is necessary for the national government and so on, but it is too late. So we are doing stuff now. And I just thought I'd draw your attention to 2 specific things that we're pursuing at the moment. One is linked, and we've linked some of the activity of the task force directly into the discussions between the Mayor and the Combined Authority and the devolution deal. And we are asking for funding for a pilot project, or funding full stop, but for energy efficiency support for this target demographic. So manufacturing businesses who have energy core to their actual business operations, not the buildings they operate in or the computers their staff use, but the lighting, but the actual manufacturing plant, which might include ovens for catering businesses and so on, but that area, which is where the cost lies and where the businesses will be killed. So that's a no-brainer intervention. We should be putting money into that. It permanently reduces demand. And the good news is we're getting positive feedback from government in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I'm very hopeful that we will get some money away through the devolution deal that we can get into West Midlands businesses fairly quickly to support that kind of activity. So that's one thing. The other thing, which is very, very immediate, is we are increasingly, through our evidence gathering, gathering sufficient evidence that gives us confidence to make very strong statements about systematic ways in which the energy sector is biased against manufacturing customers and the economy of the West Midlands, essentially. The way it operates through brokers and suppliers and the way these fixed tariffs are set up just puts businesses in a position where money is being sucked out of them now into the hands of the energy companies and the brokers as well, who act as intermediaries in this space, by default almost. So my example is a broker I was speaking to yesterday who's really good, and he does a good job at providing the best deals for his customers across this region. And he charges 0.5% commission on every kilowatt hour that goes through him. So last year, he was taking £5,000 from a million kilowatt hour a year contract with a manufacturing business. Fair enough, that was the value he was adding. The manufacturing business was doing its business, he was doing his business. This year, just as a result of the volatility in the prices and the fact that everything's changed, he's taking £25,000 or £30,000 from that same business. And he's doing the same thing, and he's doing an honest job, and the manufacturing business is doing the same thing, and they're doing an honest job. The economic conditions have not changed, but money is being taken from one sector, the manufacturing, the core economy of this region, and it's being given to financial intermediaries and ultimately to energy supply companies. And the government's EBDS scheme, which is supposed to mitigate against this, is just pumping more money into the energy suppliers and the brokers, and none of it's actually getting to the customers. So we're going to make a case of this. The mayor's very much on board with this as well, and we're proposing to hold some kind of summit towards the end of March in the Black Country with the businesses and the energy companies, and see if we can get some kind of constructive outcome from the energy sector where they offer some recompense for what's actually happening, because it's very, very obvious now. I think I'll leave it there.
Just before I come on to you, Tom, a couple of. Can you turn your mic on? Just one point, within the report of 4.4, it does talk with regards to the industrial energy efficiency and the pilot programme that we've been negotiating. As it says, as Matthew said, we've received some pretty positive response to our conversations with government on that, and hopefully that will come to fruition when the TDD is finally negotiated with government. And the only small point is it's now not BEIS, it's Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. But I'll take questions, and Tom to start.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I just looked very good summary there, Matthew, but I wanted to stress, and I think this is true, you can back me up, that Germany has spent, I think, 500 billion euros to support the manufacturing industry. We are proposing to spend 5.5 billion pounds sterling. I think that puts it in a perspective of how we feel about it. And I can tell you my competitors are paying anything from a half to a third what we're paying.
Matthew, do you want to comment on that? Or?
No, just to confirm that the figure, it's 200 billion euros that the Germans are using to set a fixed price cap. So they, the problem with our scheme is it's linked to the volatile price. It's a discount on a fluctuating price. So it does nothing to actually change the structural market challenges that you face as a business buying energy when you don't know what price it's going to be. In Germany, independent of the amount of money, which is huge, but they are a huge economy as well, they have fixed the price of electricity and gas for all businesses across their economy for the next 12 months. And that fixed certainty enables people to invest and the economy to function much more smoothly than we can.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you, Chair. It really isn't a question. I mean, one of the points I was making earlier, I think Sandwell of all the Black Country boroughs probably suffers most in relation to this energy situation with the the base of engineering and foundries in Sandwell. We'd very much like to host that summit, please, because it means a lot to the people of Sandwell and the engineering companies there. Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, I think that's probably true, but one of the issues we've also seen is the small to medium-sized enterprises are not the large energy users. So I think some of the work that we've been doing, in essence, is trying to get support for those particular sectors as well. I think that's correct, isn't it, Matthew?
Yes, yeah, it is absolutely. So it's small, mid-sized, large. They go across the piece. In fact, this region has more medium and small businesses that are energy intense than any other region in the UK, as I indicated.
Okay, any other comments or questions at this point in time? I can't see any hands up on the screen. So I'm therefore going to move on to the next section of the paper, which is mobilisation of the West Midlands Growth. Or have you done that? You've done that, have you? Hospitality, yes, we ain't going there. So it's hospitality to Andrew.
Yeah.
Please, ably supported by Becky, I believe. Is that right?
Very ably supported, yes. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I come here to this board just to kind of introduce myself as the new chair of the Tourism and Hospitality Advisory Board for the Combined Authority. We're not quite there in terms of its full membership, but we're very nearly there. And I think one of the things I would say is I hope it will provide a new strategic resource available to the Combined Authority, ultimately to benefit the people of our region. And I'm certainly very impressed by the people that we've managed to attract to the new board. There are a number of challenges, and I think, you know, energy is particularly of a concern for tourism and hospitality, particularly I think for smaller independent organisations that maybe operate on very close margins, tight margins, and are at risk of failure. And certainly my own organisation at the Black Country Living Museum, we're having to develop new skills in buying futures supply of energy, which wasn't a skill that was in the museum director's handbook when I started off a few years ago. One of the key things, though, I think for the new board is to look at how the Combined Authority is working with the local authority stakeholders and the destination marketing orgs to align the proposals of the DeBow review, which was accepted by the UK government to create a restructured visitor economy delivery organisations and landscape in England, and that will be important to do. We have our first meeting on the 3rd of March, and I hope we will be able to strengthen and help the policy around tourism and hospitality for the region. I look forward to giving further updates to this board in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Andrew? Councillor Ward, please.
I have a question and a point I'd like to make first. On page 17, there's reference to what is referred to as the halo effect of the Commonwealth Games. And it's noted in that paragraph that accommodation bookings for February of this year are 145% up compared with 2022. I think this is making the argument that these large-scale international events do have an impact on tourism into both the city of Birmingham and the wider region. Now, I've just asked Bob that is noted in respect of a report later on this agenda. And then the question I have is in respect of the Tourism and Hospitality Advisory Board, because there's a select group of organisations that appear to have been singled out to form this. Birmingham Hilton Metropole presumably is representing hotels across the region. I'd be interested to know how that decision was arrived at and what opportunities were afforded to other major visitor attractions across the region to be part of this. I would like to point out that Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery is the largest city museum service in England. Before COVID, it attracted close on 1 million visitors a year. It is rated by DCMS as outstanding. It has a world-renowned pre-Raphaelite collection, and DCMS rate it as a regional, national and international importance. So was an offer made to Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery to be part of this? Thank you.
I'm happy to answer that. On the first point, I agree with Councillor Ward about the very positive impact of large-scale events into this region. We saw that through the Games, and I think we can see it again. And I think it's a key part of pushing and improving tourism and hospitality in the region. So I agree with that totally. In terms of membership of the board, it was an open recruitment process.
It was.
It was indeed. So any influence you can bring to bear with potentially Sarah or Zach from the museum in Birmingham to want to be part of this, I would welcome that. We do have some still some vacancies on the board, but they didn't express any interest, and it was an open recruitment process.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to take that back, and I will encourage them. Can't instruct them, unfortunately, but I will encourage them to become a part of this. And then the Birmingham Hilton Metropole.
Yeah, again, they applied individually. Nicola Underhill applied, and I do think that they're in a good position to represent the issues of hotels in the region. But again, they applied by their own initiative in an open recruitment process.
Yeah, that is fair enough. Do I read then from what you've said that other hotels did not put themselves forward?
Through this process, no, they didn't. No.
Interesting. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the thing that I picked up was it wasn't very geographically spread, and I'm coming from the same route again. I'd like to see if there are vacancies, some attempt to get some a bit more Black Country representation, please. I know you're there as the chair, but
yeah,
yeah,
I agree with that. But we did a huge amount of effort to try and get a representation. I would welcome a far greater geographical representation as well. So any influence you've got to bear on that, then please do bring forward. Yeah, thank you.
I think the point is it was an open process, and in essence, you need people to make an application to take part. And if they don't, that may be a failing on the fact of how it was put out there. But at the end of the day, we need people to come forward who've got the time and the inclination to do that. That's fine.
I sense from what you're saying, this was widely advertised and communicated to potential tourist attractions and other associated businesses that might want to be involved. I see you nodding.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No? Thank you, Andrew, for your first meeting. That was baptism of fire. There you go. Okay, we're therefore going to move on in the agenda to item number 6, which is understanding condition and labour market challenges. And I've got Fiona Aldridge's name against this one. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The paper's in 2 parts. The first providing a bit of an overview of the labour market, and I'll just give you a quick update on that. And the second is a proposed work plan about how we might go forward to be able to both understand and think about how we address some of the labour market challenges within the region and in specific localities of the region, with the work to be overseen by the Economic Growth Board. I have set out in the paper some of the regional figures. I do want to update them. As Delma said, there was some labour market data published yesterday. We have it only at regional level. Local level data is both it's published less often, and there is a time lag. There's some real challenges about being able to get to the depth of some of that local data, which I will come on to later. But just to say that the data that was published yesterday, you may have seen some of the national figures, but within our region, there's been a slight fall in economic inactivity, in particular as young people who are students have also joined the labour market. And there had been a gap there actually with students being further away from the labour market than is traditionally so. Unemployment is slightly up, but actually that is people moving from economic inactivity into unemployment. So actually it is more positive in that more people are looking for work and therefore available to support to do that. In general, because employment levels haven't changed, then what we're finding is that those who are closest to the labour market are finding it easier to come back into work, which is great news for them. It's probably to do with inflation and increasing cost of living. We have still around 92,000 vacancies across 7 local authorities. Been a slight decline, but still historically high. Where we're starting to see the decline is in those smallest employers. But as Delma said, actually our businesses are facing some considerable labour market shortages, and actually it's only in helping those who are furthest away from the labour market will we both support those individually, but address some of those challenges that our businesses face. Another key thing just to flag, and it is in the paper, it does vary considerably by local areas. You'll know that from your own wider responsibilities, but there is a key gender divide in this region too. So generally men are in a stronger place in the labour market than women, but actually what we're seeing in the region is that over the last year there's more women in employment and less in inactivity and unemployment. So some key challenges there to look at by gender as well as by place. What we have proposed in the second part of the paper is a sort of work plan over a 9-month period, although that could vary, that we would suggest being overseen by the Economic Growth Board, and it has 3 parts. So the first is that much more in-depth analysis of what the labour market looks like, and it would change over time. There's quite a lot of variation happening at the moment, to look at what that means for particular groups and in particular places. The public data that is available often doesn't enable us to look at that in the depth that we would like to, and we have already picked up conversations with some local authorities and keen to do that more, to think about how we can take that ONS data and use that to add value to the data that your own teams within local authorities are looking at, so that we can really try and understand our labour market in all sorts of parts of the region. The second is that we not only want to understand the challenges of the labour market, but we want to understand what we can do to address them. And therefore, the second stage of this work is to bring alongside us an external expert group, which would include think tanks, maybe some key charities, to help us think through what we might do in response, and also to shape that policy debate. It is those sorts of organisations that are advising government at the minute as they do their external review, as parties shape manifestos. Actually, this will be a chance for us to get the region on their policy shaping, as well as to be able to get their expertise, more than actually we could do as a CA or even collectively as a region. And then the third strand is that I suggest we take a deep dive focus on 2 or 3 issues or places where we really try and look at what we can do and bring our resources to bear on tackling some of those issues. I would expect that to come out of the analysis and the expert group advice, but we know just from our kind of top level analysis where we have particular issues, for example, youth unemployment in Wolverhampton, particular parts of Birmingham where we have high levels of adult employment, the challenge we have around in-work poverty, and high numbers of UC claimants in work. So out of that work, we'd suggest those 2 to 3 issues or places could come out of that. So the ask of the group is that for any consideration and reflection on the challenges, and then thoughts and agreement on an approach to how we might then deepen our understanding and identify solutions to the challenges that we face. It's not a one-off, and the labour market will continue to change, but I think this will help us be able to develop our capabilities and our understanding to respond to them as that happens. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Just one point, we are being asked today to establish this task force, aren't we?
I think what we're suggesting is that the Economic Growth Board becomes the task force. If that is
as a particular piece of work, so that's fine, because it wasn't in the recommendations. I just want to make sure we know what we're doing. So in essence, the EGB itself becomes the task force and sets up the work plan accordingly. Is that what you're suggesting? Okay. Any questions or comments, please? Councillor Hughes.
Yes, Chair. I think we need to particularly look in specific areas where there are issues. I mean, health, but more so social care is a problem for every local authority. And I think that's an aspect that needs to have some deep diving and some sort of real solutions to try and turn that around. It's probably across the country, but if we could start something rolling in this area would be good.
Absolutely, it's a key part of those economic inactivity figures, whereas we're seeing students and other groups returning to the labour market. The big issue is those people with long-term health conditions. How we bring together our services in an integrated way to be able to support that is a real challenge. Some of that lies within what we might do around employment support, what we might do around the economy. There is a massive challenge within that around our health and social care services too.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I've got 2 other speakers. I'll take Councillor Ian Courts, please, first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad you clarified the point about what the task force is, because I think that's quite important. Do you know, I mean, my concern about, refer to 9 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever, a long period of time. Do we not know already a lot where the issues are and where we should be deep diving? I mean, in terms of the 3 points in the Annex 1, I mean, I have no problem with the third one. I mean, I don't think it's just youth unemployment in Wolverhampton. It's youth unemployment across, well, certainly East Birmingham, North Solihull. It refers to East Birmingham, but I'm assuming it means North Solihull as well. I mean, youth unemployment, we know has been a problem, systemic, and that's something we should tackle and tackle as a priority. So, and I think there probably are also issues, perhaps tourism and hospitality, which could, a more quicker issues. But my point really is, why do we need a task force? Happy to, support it if it's this board, but I can see 2.1 and 2.2 being, a talk shop. And I honestly, we need to get on with things like what's in 3.
Thank you. Is yours on the same point, Corin? If it is, I'll take both before I go back to Fiona. No, fine. Fiona, do you want to answer Councillor Courts then, please?
Yes, certainly. So I think what we're trying to avoid is people go away, sit in a room for 9 months and come out with a report at the end. So that we are having work streams whereby we really understand the data, and the labour market is changing and very different, I think, from where it has historically been. Particularly if we're going to a recession, we're in quite a different position. So we want to be able to make sure that we're understanding that properly and that we are bringing in external expertise around what we know works, but that they would be strands that run across the piece that really help us inform some of the challenges. I think we do know some of those, but I think we need to bring in some fresh insight as well about how we might challenge it. But I think those things could run concurrently.
Chairman, if I could just come back, it's focus we need on this. There's a reference to youth unemployment already in the report. 2.8 talks about the qualifications differences, which is very big between WMCA and nationally. And I just question how much more data we need. We need to get into those particular aspects, and that's where we need some action. And I'm concerned about this being far too wide a focus.
Point made. I'll put Julie on. She just wants to answer a couple of points.
Yeah, I think it's exactly the point you're making, Councillor Courts. We want to get more into the data, though, to understand what's working and what's not, because in these areas we know there have been persistent issues. East Birmingham, North Solihull, we know there's been lots of work going on in Wolverhampton around youth unemployment. But actually starting to understand why people aren't taking up the training programmes that are there, or the job opportunities that aren't there, what other sorts of interventions are needed. So we don't just talk about it, we actually put in place investment and intervention that can start to make some meaningful change, because as you rightly point out, a lot of these issues, they're not new to us, but actually when we look at how much money has been spent on training, on unemployment support, it's a lot, and it still doesn't seem to be shifting the dial. So it's much more of a kind of action-based research that we want to be doing, working with young groups. So, what a young Pakistani boy in Nechells might need, or Amrock might need, might be very different to what a young single mom in Wolverhampton might need. So again, making sure we've picked up on the different user experiences and we've got the right jobs. A lot of it, though, we think it's about connecting to those better jobs. And bluntly, if you're on benefit at the moment, a 0-hour contract, low-paid job isn't good enough for you to come off benefit and all the risks that brings with you. So making sure that we're really getting into the sort of detail of behavioural issues.
You want to come back in?
Well, yes, I think the report, it isn't what the report says. I mean, it talks about a regional task force and then goes into deep dive. Personally, I think that page 22, I think it is, the proposals need remodelling and more of a focus.
Thank you. I'm going to take Corin next, and then I've got Councillor Ward. Corin, please.
Oh yeah, thanks, Esmond, for that report. I think the task force is a great idea, but we also need to focus on some really innovative, sort of commercially focused solutions to getting certain groups of the job market back into work again. So we need to do something very different with the over 50s, which we know is a big workforce who don't necessarily want full-time work again. They want more flexible patterns. and they're not being picked up on any of the normal routes to market at the moment. So how we engage with those groups in a proactive way is really important. And the second one is in lieu of an announcement at the budget next month or this month, how we deal with childcare costs, because at the moment 1.75 million people are being held back from going into work because of excessive childcare costs. So what we can do as a region, and most of them are women, what we can do as a region to either have a tax break for those childcare costs, or maybe how we use, business expenses to the proportion of those costs. Just something different that we can say in the West Midlands, we're focusing on these really active, well-skilled people, and this is how we're getting them back in the job market again.
Thank you. I'm just going to take Councillor Ward, please.
I just want to support what Julian said, because I do think it's worth doing some digging and research into this whole issue of the amount of money that's been spent over many, many years on training and trying to encourage people into employment. And when you look at the unemployment statistics, particularly for Birmingham, and you look at the areas of deprivation across Birmingham, nothing much has changed across the last 40 years. So, we're spending money here and we don't seem to be able to demonstrate the impact of it. And for some people who go from benefits into employment, they can be paying a marginal tax rate of 70%. It's the highest marginal tax rate in the country. So that's a disincentive in itself. What must also be incredibly dispiriting is going into paid employment, going into the world of work, and you still can't make ends meet. And that is increasingly the case nowadays. I think it's a real indicator of the way this country is broken. We're a first world nation, and yet work doesn't work for many, many people in this country. They're still reliant on benefits and food banks, even though they're in employment. So I do agree with what Julia said. There's some real research needs to be done here into this. And we can't impact all of that or affect all of it ourselves, but we at least should be making a case to government.
Yeah, just very briefly, and just to connect the last 2 points, because I think there's a lot that we can and will want to do with employers, both as Councillor Courts has said, in really setting out to employers how you can be more attractive to recruit to meet your labour market shortage, your labour shortages. Having flexible work is key, not least in attracting over 50s back into employment. But also as part of that, and it links to our plan for growth strategy, that focus on good work, because actually we need good jobs that pay well enough for people to come off benefits to progress in their careers. And actually that's part of what we haven't always got right in the past, and certainly where DWP haven't always been focusing on any old job. So it's got to be good work as well to make sure that people can progress and can survive. So I think that's an element of work that we've been doing with Lee Barron from TUC as well. I think Rob's on the call today, but we're very keen to bring that back to this group as well.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Adrian Andrew, I think, on the screen. Is that right, Adrian? You don't come up on my screen properly. Oh, there you are. It is you.
I thought you were going to say I don't come up very often. That's true. I think when it comes to youth unemployment, one of the first ports of call would be the Warsaw Works programme that we've been running for over 10 years now, and we established that with council funds specifically to tackle youth unemployment, and it has had an impact on youth unemployment across Warsaw, across all areas of Warsaw, to be honest. So that would be a good port of call instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and reinvent stuff that's already sort of being done. And I think on that research as well, it would be very interesting on how different organisations are using the levy as well, the apprenticeship levy, and the kind of people who are getting the access to those courses, those funds, and particularly the jobs that should come from the apprenticeship levy as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a helpful point. I mean, we do consolidate some of the funds on apprentice levy within the combined authority where it's not utilised by others. And that's, from the figures I've seen, has demonstrated quite an opportunity that's been delivered on that. There we go. Anybody else wish to comment? Do you want to come back, Fiona?
I think that's quite a helpful steer. I think the steer is that we focus on making a difference and making an impact. That the evidence is useful to being able to understand the nature of the challenge and how we can make a difference. But this is essentially about changing the situation rather than creating a research project.
On Councillor Adrian Andrews' point, I mean, where best practice exists, we do need to be fully cognizant of what it delivers. So I think that's really helpful. On Corinne's point, which I think was more about childcare, I'm not too sure that the task force will actually be picking that particular item up. It seems to be slightly outside its remit, but obviously the minutes will reflect that. You put your thumbs up, so that's fine. On that basis, we'll note that. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My main point is I would like to see the figures broke down more so within the region, so we know exactly what age group and where we should be targeting resources to help. I think that'd be helpful as well for individual authorities. And second point is, how far are we working with the colleges at the present moment? We've got quite a lot in Dudley at the moment with various things, doing various courses, etc., etc. But it'd be always interested to find out if they get a job to increase the vulnerability of the West Midlands Combined as an organisation, rather than export themselves after we've educated them to, I should have used the word Timbuktu, if you see the point I'm making. So I think, you know, when you go to the degree of education, then that knowledge that we've provided for and paid for, we should make better use of than what we are at the moment.
Good point. Okay. Yeah, sorry, please.
Just to come back on that, we work really closely with all of the colleges, and we've been moving over the 4 years of managing the adult education budget through devolution to having a greater focus on outcomes. And one of the things we have been doing with all of the colleges is monitoring the numbers of people progressing into work or onto apprenticeships or higher education. So not just how many people have achieved qualifications, but where they're going and what they're doing, and increasingly focusing on that and seeing some really positive results, I have to say, in places. Dudley is one of them, Wolverhampton is another one where we've seen really good outcomes from the colleges. But yes, absolutely, that's key to our work.
So I think we're given some direction on the work plan, the establishment of the task force, which I think is a good move through the EGB. And I think we've covered most of the points to reflect the paper itself. So we'll take those matters on board and we'll go from. Thank you. We now have a verbal update, a report, in fact, on the presentation by Julie on LEP integration. Julie, please.
Thanks, Councillor Slane. Oops. Just a few slides to talk you through. So as colleagues will know, the paper went to the last Combined Authority board with the LEP integration plan to be submitted. It's a challenge my eyesight now trying to read this. We have a couple of things to update on. We've since had confirmation from government that the function that was transferring to us around providing assurance on assurance over legacy funds essentially will no longer have to, that will be done directly between the LEP accountable bodies, so Walsall and Birmingham, and DLUP directly. So that's providing future assurance over monitoring arrangements for the enterprise zones, legacy funds. Makes perfect sense, but we were getting in the way really of a relationship between those accountable bodies and government, and we've always been very clear that the enterprise zone is the funding should stay locally, it doesn't come to us. The plan has gone in as promised slightly later because government asked us to hold off whilst we waited for budgets to be confirmed. Budgets weren't confirmed, so we put it in anyway because as far as we were concerned it was right to do so. We've shared drafts with them, so we're not expecting massive showstoppers to come out. The 3 LEPs also submitted their transition plans at the same time, so that suite of documents provides the region plans for how we're managing this transition. The day after we submitted, we did get confirmation of funding, which is probably always the way. As expected, it was a lot less than we've had previously, and a lot less even than we were expecting. So just in terms of the scale of that, previously each LEP would have had, I think, with a reduction around about 375k, so over £1 million for the region. We've been told that we get up to 250k, and that has to cover all of the transition costs as well. So pretty pitiful, but it is kind of what was expected. The 2 functions that are mainly transferring to us around careers and around the growth hub, we've actually got funding for those, will come through separate contracts, one through BAYS and one through the Careers and Enterprise Company. So again, the money that we've had from the LEP was really to support some of that broader stuff, not to do that direct delivery, but we have yet to have confirmation of funding there. So there is some risk still to us within that, although we've had a letter of comfort from the CEC about levels of funding, and we also have identified SPF funding to support the core growth of activity, which we've been working on with our local authority partners. It's at that tricky stage now. None of this has been easy, not least for LEPs and the work that they've done and the people that they employ and their key non-exec members and boards. This is a difficult transition where lots of the answers still aren't fully known. We are working through the CHUPE process now, working closely with our LEP colleagues on this. Timing is tight, and for us it's still fraught with some risks because the funding still has not been confirmed. But what we agreed, what we said to board was we didn't want to hold it up anymore. That wasn't fair on individuals, so we have committed to working through that process so that people get a better sense of what will happen to them. And then just to note that there are 3 different approaches across the region with the 3 different LEPs. So the Black Country LEP has committed to close by the end of March, and we're very committed to work to that as a timescale, making sure that we focus on that particularly and we work to that speed, because obviously people being affected there. Coventry and Warwickshire LEP we expect to close down, but functions will transfer over, or sorry, the activity will continue through the Coventry and Warwickshire Growth Hub, so there is more of a kind of continuity there. And then the GBS LEP will close down. The plan is at the end of March in 2024 and continue for a year with things like ESF funded programmes and then functions tapering off. So I think broadly that's where we have got to on that. In terms of the processes that are underway, just a few things to bring to your attention. One of the key issues has been about how we maintain, how we strengthen our business voice and decision making. I think we had an agreement to look across all of our boards around where the employer voice is, and particularly, and I think something that certainly Tom has been very vocal about, making sure we don't lose the voice of the SME in this process as well. So a number of things have been set up to do that. I'll touch on those in a moment. And as well as that, we've asked for those LEP members, non-exec members that are sitting on CA boards, if they are prepared to continue for another year, just to maintain that continuity as we go through transition. We've also used it as an opportunity to tidy up some of our arrangements, things like the Regional Business Council and the EIG, which meets on a fortnightly basis. As I said, CHUPE is underway. We're sharing now information, working through the detail of that. Formal negotiations will begin on the 3rd of March, but we're doing as much as possible in advance of that. We're also really keen that we think CHUPE either doesn't apply or where there may be competition for roles, that across the family of organisations, so ourselves, the 7 Mets, potentially other partners as well, that we do everything we can to provide good redeployment opportunities for staff that are affected. So making sure that vacancies are being highlighted, shared, etc. And then the approach to making sure that we manage redundancy costs. We're working with our local authority FDs on that process so that we manage that in a way that is sensible. As we do that work with business, clearly there will be transition and there will be some change. Did an update to the local authority chief execs today, and I think Tim is on the call. I think one of the things we've got to be really honest about is there's a hell of a lot less funding going into this now. So in terms of the service that will be available, it will be much reduced. There is, less funding going in from government directly, but also when we look at the levels of ERDF and ESF funding that previously supported activity compared to what we get through shared prosperity, it is a lot less. So our commitment is working with local partners, working with the growth company to make sure that we deliver as efficiently as possible and make the best use of all resources. But what we cannot say is this is going to be a vastly improved, enhanced service because the levels of funding are so much less. So we're trying to manage transition in a way that delivers that as efficiently as possible too. Some work still to do on innovating contracts, particularly around careers and enterprise company, and then just making sure we have all the legalities in place for things like data transfers and licenses and some of the slightly trickier stuff, but essential that needs to be done. So underway on that, and again, massive thanks to colleagues in the LEPs for their patience and perseverance with us on pulling this together. And but yeah. Just in terms of strengthening private sector voice, what we've looked at is rather than developing the business board, which is one option, making sure that actually with the existing laws that we have, that we try to really play to the strengths and make sure that we've got private sector representation on those, and building on best practice as we start to bring in new private sector reps, that we do that open and transparently through recruitment, which would include recruiting a new SME champion to sit on this board as well, which we will embark on shortly. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. So happy to take any questions or comments, and let colleagues may want to add as well. There's still some work to do, but the feels like at this stage there are no showstoppers, but just a lot less funding than we would like.
So I've got Tom and then I've got Paula. Tom, please.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I'm just concerned about the speed of us understanding who these employees are, and I'm on behalf of our executive now, really, that we know exactly who is going to be TUPE'd, and that they are going to be TUPE'd properly, as was promised, frankly, by Ian Brookfield. So I just want that to be registered as to where we are. But I do appreciate that all of us trying hard to try and make it easy for each other so far as we can. The transition is as smooth as it can be. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. We'll consolidate the questions and then we can come back to them. Paula, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Slay, and thank you for your acknowledgement at the start of the meeting. I think that was really helpful to hear, and so thank you back. In fact, the question really from me is in relation to the voice of the private sector, and Julie and I, we chat about this actually just last night. We worked really closely around sort of the correspondence and the engagement with the kind of the outgoing board directors. Has that been sent, Julie? Because it suggests by the presentation it has, and I thought we were working collaboratively with you guys so that we could get the kind of the agreed correspondence out. So if it's gone, do you know where it is in the process? And if it hasn't, we'd be really keen to sort of make sure that we were cited before it went. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just hold on that for the moment. Henrietta, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I was also wondering whether those letters have gone, and it would be good to see them. With regards to the voice of business as well, it's probably worth noting that the LEPs do have a number of industry-led boards that we support. In our case, for example, the Food and Drink Forum, a Life Sciences Group, the Low Carbon and Energy Technology Steering Group. They will all be stood down by the end of March because our policy remit will end at the end of March. So if you did want to tap into that talent and business representation on those groups, it would be really good to have a shared communication that we can share with people so they can put themselves forward as and when opportunities within the CA arise. The other question I just want or comment I wanted to make is in the LEP integration plan that was submitted just a few days ago, there's a reference to TUPE consultation starting no later than the 13th of February. On your slide, you referenced the 3rd of March. And given that TUPE is a legal process and it has to start within 28 days of the actual transfer happening, it's really important we work very closely together to make sure that we don't end up with a breach and open ourselves up to employee challenge, because certainly this affects quite a few people, and I noticed the timelines now become really quite tight. So that's just a request, really. Let's stay very closely in close communication on that one.
Thanks for that. So two questions related to TUPE and Paula's question as well. So I'm going to, before I say general comments, I'm going to pass back to Julie to answer those particular points.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of TUPE, we are clearly following the process as advised by our legal and HR colleagues. It's well understood, and although the formal consultation piece will take place 28 days before the date of transfer, what we're in an informal stage at the moment, whereas, you know, we're sharing information with you, you've seen structures, you've told us who you think transfers, we will respond to say, yes, absolutely, this one feels like it does, or on this one we need a bit more evidence, or we don't agree. So we're kind of not in the formal talking to individual state, but we are in the information gathering, sharing, moving forward. So our team here are confident that we will be coming back to you today with, this week with some points of clarification, but that the information that we need to manage this process is well underway. It will always prove challenging because whilst elements of this will be very straightforward, some of it will be subjective and even, I mean, to be very open with people, even if we transfer, there may be 3 people transferring from one role. We may still have to make people redundant despite transferring. I wish it were otherwise, but as you know, the funding is pretty limited. So part of this will be, you know, having to manage within pretty tight budgets. But what we're trying to do is to be as fair and objective as possible on that 2P process. And then in terms of the letter, I'm going to look at Jonathan if it has got out from Julia. I know Julia was leading on that, but and I know we shared a draft, Paula, with you, but I'm not sure if the final version has gone out.
Yeah, sorry, just to update colleagues, unfortunately due to kind of some holidays this week, I think the final send out will be at the beginning of next week. But yeah, those kind of drafts are in the pipeline. So apologies for the slides. It's future tense rather than past tense.
Okay. Yeah, Henrietta, Paul, you looking back?
I think we might want to say the same thing. It would be great to see a draft. Certainly, I've not seen a draft. Paula might have done.
No, I know I had a really helpful conversation with Julia, and I think Joe might be in the room with Joe, and we agreed that it would come back so that it landed, and you know, so that's really all I was just concerned of. Really like to see it so that we can help navigate it back on the patch our end and it lands as it should. So be great to see it when it's ready before it goes. Thank you.
I think Julie's just given that commitment, so I think that's acknowledged. Okay. I'll therefore go to Councillor Hughes, please. Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, just a couple of points and suggestions, really. I'm with Henrietta in terms of the need to assimilate expertise that has been built up over years and not to allow it to disappear overnight. And I think any way that the people that she's talking about in those groups should be allowed to take part in combined authority activity wherever that's appropriate. Secondly, can I ask, in terms of the vacancies, particularly in the Black Country LEP, have the people in the Black Country LEP, have there been liaison with the HR departments of the local authorities on vacancies? Has that happened?
So on the first on the groups, and apologies, Henrietta, I didn't come back to that point that you made earlier. Yeah, I think we'd be very keen to pick up with you. I know we've had some conversations with Black Country and Country and Warwickshire to a certain extent about making sure that we don't lose that expertise. So really happy to do that where we can. In terms of vacancies, yes, and I think what we've also encouraged people to look at is, as part of the business support offer through Shared Prosperity Fund, each local authority will have a network of local business advisors, which we think will offer opportunities for people currently employed, particularly in the business support functions of Growth Hub. So I know that lots of those conversations have started to happen with local authorities. Again, we're encouraging that. It's not for us to direct, but I know that certainly in the Black Country in particular, people are developing capacity. They're having conversations with colleagues in Growth Hub as well.
Sorry, one last point, Chair, if I can. Sorry. One last point.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Just to say that I'd like to say that we attended a very enjoyable Black Country LEP celebration of what it's achieved. Sad in some ways, but it really recognised the input of people of the years, and I was pleased to be able to attend that. And I think it's I think each of the local enterprise partnerships should be thanked, and we need to acknowledge the work that they've done over the years to take this region forward.
Fully support that sentiment, Councillor Hughes. Exactly. I've got Sarah with your hand up. Sarah, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thank you, Councillor Hughes, for those words of recognition of the work that's gone on. But with regards to the point of working with local authorities and indeed other partners who have worked with the LEP over the years, we are proactively working with all on trying to identify suitable alternate vacancies as and when they arise. So just to give reassurances that we're collaborating on those matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other points before we move to the next item? No further indications on the screen or in the room. Thank you very much. We now have a fairly substantial item, led by Tim Johnson, Chief Executive of Wolverhampton. This is the West Midlands Growth Company review. Tim, it's over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting this update on behalf of Councillor Brookfield, and I'll be sure to take the best wishes of the board to Ian when I speak to him. So you've got a very comprehensive report in front of you, so I'm just going to kind of give a brief overview of some of the most pertinent points, if I could. As the board will know, we commissioned as a board a review of the growth company's functions, funding and governance, with the view about making recommendations to the board in due course, and obviously up to the CA board in due course. So, as I say, the report gives the findings of the review to date, and I'd just like to sort of say that the purpose of the way we've attempted to do the review has been in a very inclusive and collaborative way. This isn't about individuals kind of directing in a particular way, and it's quite appropriate that the findings will come back for due consideration by this board and subsequently the CA board. But what we have attempted to do is to tap into the expertise that exists within the company, which I think is a sensible thing to do, in terms of shaping some of the recommendations and options moving forward. A big part of the review has been consultation, I think in a much more comprehensive way than maybe has been the case in the past, with the individual local authorities to understand their priorities from a sort of place perspective, and that work is still ongoing. So many of the authorities have been engaged at a senior officer and senior politician basis, but I understand there are still a few of those conversations to be had, and the intention is that that is not just a one-off process. That will be very much embedded in the future way the company works in moving forward in terms of regular reviews, so that whilst we will have a moment in time to kind of shape the scale and focus of the company, the intention is that it will be far more it will develop in a more integrated way with the needs and priorities of individual places. So as you can see, there's a whole series of details in the report. One of the primary focuses of the report initially was around the financial future of the company, to satisfy the kind of immediate challenges around going concern, but also try to move towards a more sustainable financial position. And the review considered kind of 4 different approaches to that, which were, from one extreme, the dissolution of the company, which I think would be almost perverse in the current market, where we're looking to tap into the opportunities that the West Midlands has demonstrated and has, but nevertheless scenarios around reduction, consolidation and growth. And after a lot of deliberations with a whole series of colleagues, the sponsors group, which, if I could just remind you, is the chair of the growth company, Matt Hammond, Councillor Brookfield as chair of EGB, and the mayor, came to a view that actually the option around consolidation was the right approach to take at this point, accepting that we would nevertheless want to retain that kind of ambition moving forward if resources allowed. But it felt that it was appropriate to maintain the company at the kind of level that it demonstrated its value, particularly, I have to say, over the last year during the Commonwealth Games, where the activity it led under the BATP programme, I think, has had significant advantages for the region and is opening up even further opportunities moving forward. So we move through. If I could just talk about a couple of things in a little bit more detail. So throughout all of the consultations under the review, the kind of functions of the company have not really been disputed, and they focus around business, capital attraction, visitor and event attraction. But the difference being that they're far more influenced and shaped by local priorities, trying to reflect those things that we would see being delivered at a regional level, but also those things that are important to local place that contribute to our local economies. In addition, there was a significant desire to see a much more coordinated approach to how we manage relationships with our strategic businesses across the West Midlands, and that's particularly pertinent given the last conversation around changes to the LEP. So again, given if the funding regime, the funding scenario is agreed, it will enable the company to look more significantly at how it manages those strategic relationships, but not in isolation. And I think that's the point that hopefully is coming across throughout all of this work, is that this is very much done in collaboration with local authorities, with the Combined Authority and other key partners. This isn't about agreeing a solution for the company and doing it in isolation. Points were made at the start of the meeting about some of the performance indicators, and quite rightly so, and some of that benchmarking. And again, we want to make sure that we position the company to be a leading advocate in that respect, and certainly best in class, given the resources that hopefully will come forward. In terms of governance, and this was again one of the issues that was explored, one of the key findings that's come out of the review is that each local authority should be, and hopefully moving forward will be represented on the board, which is not currently the case. In essence, that will mean both Sandwell and Walsall MBCs will have a place on the board, and also that we, as is timely in companies, the private sector membership is reviewed to make sure that we not only capitalise on the private sector talent and leadership in the region, but that we make sure that there's the right skills mix around the board, that it can support and drive the company moving forward. And another key governance dimension of this really is the relationship with this board, with EGB, to make sure again that the activity and focus of the company is aligned with the bigger strategic economic environment which we cover at this board. And as I said earlier, to make sure that there's a much more structured engagement with local authorities on a quarterly basis, which I think will be very much welcomed. A particular question came up around economic geography. Obviously, the company works predominantly on the footprint of the West Midlands metropolitan area, but recognising that economic geography has a slightly different footprint. For example, the Coventry-Warwickshire relationship, also, for example, the Wolverhampton-Staffordshire relationship. It's important that we understand how the activities of the company will reflect that geography. And finally, really, just in terms of the funding, you will see in the papers that there was a need to agree an initial funding approach for the company, but that there is an additional ask of the legacy funding, which will be considered later on in this agenda, to get to the headline kind of level of funding which the scenario that was sort of agreed would require. But it was also a point of the review that the company should look for efficiencies where it could, around the sort of 10 to 15% kind of mark. So hopefully that gives members of the board a bit of an overview, very comprehensive report. I can see Matt's on the screen here as well, and obviously you've got Neil and Katie in the room who've done a lot of the detail work. So hopefully that gives a bit of an overview for the board, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, both Matt, Neil and Katie are with us in the room. I'm going to open it up for comments or questions. There are a large number of items within the paper which we need to agree, but any questions up to this point within the room or on the screen? Councillor Hughes.
Chair, I have several questions and a few points as well. In the minutes of the previous meeting that were at the start of this meeting today, it was minuted that the rail company needed to secure £4 million funds to remain as a going concern for 2023-24, and yet within 3 months we're being asked for a £12 million investment, and I would like to ask whether that's considered a proportionate sort of increase on what was being discussed 2 months ago, when we haven't even got to the end of the review. And we haven't had an evaluation of the BATP programme from the Commonwealth Games, and the £13 million that was spent on that. So there's been no evaluation done there. We're still concerned from a Sandwell point of view that this review hasn't been done independently, and as I say, it wasn't only ourselves that made that point at the last meeting. In the recommendation 2.1.4, we feel there's no or little information on strategic account management in there, and I think we would need any detail relating to that before we signed up to anything in principle. And when we start looking at the total ask, when we go through the report and some of the recommendations, we're actually saying that during the course of the next 12 months, 2 years, we're thinking about 32.7 million being given to the growth company, which includes the tourism program of 10.7. That's in addition to the 22 million. So you know, it's getting quite a lot of money, and are we going to get value for money from that? Can I point out a rectification that needs to be made in paragraph 6.1.18? West Midlands Growth Company has no current role in the delivery of battery storage farms in Sandwell, so that support wouldn't be required. We would welcome representation on the board. I think anything which actually includes combined authority members as a whole is welcomed. We believe that in terms of the options that have been put out in Appendix 1, we've got the options, but we don't appear to have the what can we say, the detail behind those options, and it would be useful if we did. And basically, we feel that the report is heavily weighted towards the £12 million option, and Sandwell would be very happy to support the £6 million core funding that has been discussed, but we do have concerns about increasing that to 12. So that's where Sandwell sits on this. There's some points in there, and there's some in there.
I'll just take one more comment before I come across Tom, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that I think it was evidence from the report. This is how crucial the growth company is to having planning, getting something executed. And I've been privileged to be on the board for a little while, and we have wasted a lot of time checking whether we're a going concern, doing a lot of detailed background work, which is not as productive as it could otherwise be. So I'm a great advocate of making sure that this is properly funded, properly organised, and I know it will from people I've worked with on there, and well led, because that is the heart of what we need to do to make a difference. It's fine. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Neil, do you want to come in? Katie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. There were a lot of questions there, so I will try and go through them. And I know I've already exchanged some emails with Tony with some of the detail around this, so I'm sure he can pick that up with you as well. Probably helpful to start with the fundamental one I think you mentioned, which is around the money, just to say we're not asking for that total amount of money. So the scenario that is the preferred one as per the sponsors group, which is still obviously being tested, is around us having a total fund of £12 million for next financial year. What you'll have seen is a funding request for legacy funding that will help towards getting us to that level. So we've got the £5.9 million, which has been secured for next year, which is the 4 million regional contribution, plus the £1.9 million of commercial and other funding that we have. But what we're seeking is an additional 4.1 million from legacy funding for next year to enable us to get to a total of £10.5 million for next financial year. We're asking for more money through legacy funding for the next one, which is why there is a total funding ask of £10.7 million for legacy. So it means that next financial year there'll be £10.5 million budget if it's successful. The following year there'll be a £12 million budget if that legacy funding request is successful. And the reason there is a difference between those two budget envelopes is that we've very much been listening to the priorities that we've heard from local authorities and the combined authority about the activity that you'll want us to undertake going forward. And we know that next year a fundamental priority of ours will be trying to land the pipeline that we've developed through business and tourism programme. So there'll be much more activity around that, and then less on some of the international promotion to generate an increased pipeline. We will look to do more of that in 24-25, hence seeking the £12 million total budget for that year. So rest assured, we're not seeking £35 million per annum or anything like that. It would all be within that 12 million or below funding envelope. I think the other fundamental point to pick up as well would be around the evaluation around business and tourism programme. So you're correct, there's not been a full evaluation on that yet, but what we have been doing is regularly reporting on a quarterly basis in terms of performance. And at the moment we are meeting or exceeding all of the targets that we've been set. So those targets run to 2027, and many of those we're 75%, 80% there already. So I've shared with Tony and happy to share with you the latest quarterly report that we've got on that, which, although I agree isn't a full evaluation of what we've been doing, hopefully it shows the benefit that we're having and how we are adding value to what we are doing. Strategic relationship management, I agree there's not a lot of detail in the report itself. One of the things we're trying to get is a principle to doing this, and then we need to work on the model of what that means in practice. And to reinforce the point that Tim made, that's very much about how we work with the Combined Authority and local authorities and other partners to get those better relationships with our top 500 businesses. At the moment, we think only a very small proportion of those businesses have any interaction with any of us at the moment. And given the current climate, economic climate, we need to address that quickly, because we won't know whether businesses are about to make fundamental decisions to move out of the region, to close, which obviously also has a big impact in terms of our workforce here, supply chains, etc. Which is why I think it's really important to push forward on strategic relationship management. And then I think just to pick up a very specific one in terms of Sandwell, you're absolutely right, we've had no interaction with you in terms of battery farms at the moment, but actually energy was one of the priorities that was raised by Tony as a potential area where we could collaborate more, given the role Sandwell is playing at the moment in terms of battery farms. So that's something we had there as a priority, because we think there's a real opportunity there where we might be able to add value and help realise your ambitions in a local place. If that's not correct, obviously we will take that out and we don't have to address that piece. So hopefully that's answered your headline questions, but if there's any others, then happy to pick those up.
And to use, please.
I think in terms of supporting this, I think that you've put more clarification into some of the financial aspects of that, which I don't think necessarily really come out in the report, and it might have been helpful had we had the sort of that verbal put in there. I think there'd have been a little less misunderstanding around it. So I'm in a difficult place here, because if you take it as read on here, it reads slightly different to what you've actually said. So I think we'd need the written confirmation of everything that you've said for us to be, really behind it. If that makes sense.
We're very happy to provide that, and I think I should probably say we're very conscious one of the areas we've not had the chance to have a political conversation is Sandwell. So we've got a session coming up with Councillor Carmichael on the 1st or 2nd of March, where again we can talk about this in a bit more detail, but very happy to provide more information for you.
And to be fair, there is that continuing programme of engagement with local authorities. Some have been engaged with, worse some when I spoke yesterday, I think, to Neil, which was still outstanding. So that conversation with Sandwell will be undertaken. There's absolutely no question about that, to gather evidence. Okay. Ian, please, Ian Ward.
Thank you. I think in fairness to the questions that Peter has asked, there are some local authorities that are closer to the work of the growth company than others, and as Katie's just pointed out, it's not been an opportunity for the growth company to lead as part of this process with Sandwell. I think, in all fairness, if Councillor Bird had been here, we'd have heard something similar in terms of scepticism. I, though, would strongly agree with the comments that Tom made at the beginning of this discussion, that we have to have some form of marketing organisation. If we don't have some form of marketing organisation, we'll have to go away and invent a new one. Certainly that would be the case for a city on the scale of Birmingham. So we've got to, the best way to do this is to come together and agree a solution to this on this wider footprint. And I agree with the comments that Katie's made about the about the business and tourism programme. Although the report might not yet be out, funnily enough, I was at an event with Neil just last week. I was asking him about the number of leads that will be followed up as a result of the success of that programme. I can't remember the number, but it was a significant number of leads for future investments into the region. So that has been a success, and that's one of the reasons why we go on to the following report. I will be arguing that there is a legacy argument here for the West Midlands Growth Company. And just finally, on the strategic relationship management proposal, and hopefully this will give Peter a little bit of comfort here, because the truth is that over the years of austerity, any budgets that did exist in local authorities to have this sort of a function and relationship with key businesses in our respective areas has been driven out by budget reductions. So having this put back in, I think, is very, very important. What I think does need to happen, it is flagged in this report, there needs to be a relationship with each of the local authorities within this. And I see there's nodding going on to my right, and that, you know, that will equally apply to Sandwell as anywhere else. Thank you.
And the point well made, I think that's one of the key points that did come out, that's relationship with the local authorities. I've got two others. Now, I've got Councillor Adrian Andrew, please, first, and then I'll take Councillor Courts.
I think Councillor Ward's spot on there in terms of some local authorities are closer to what the growth company does than others, and perhaps some local authorities haven't grasped the potential opportunities that were out there. And yes, if Councillor Bird was here, you might be hearing a more negative approach, but it's not Councillor Bird, it's Councillor Andrew, so it's less negative. So I think we're taking this as an opportunity to sort of reset that relationship with the growth company. I think it's a great step forward that Walsall and Sandwell will return to the board of the growth company and to try and take it forward. I have, at a political level, had conversations with the growth company that I thought were very constructive first steps and all of that, but I do think that this is the way forward in order to consolidate some of that work that's been done through the LEPs as well. As Tom said earlier, I think this is a good opportunity and a good vehicle to do that piece of work as well.
Thank you. Councillor Courts, please.
Yeah, I think much has been said really for the last speakers that I agree with. I mean, as Ian said, we need a marketing promotion function within the combined authority, and quite frankly, I think, you know, this paper takes things forward in a positive manner. I think we've got to sort out the wider geographic issue. I mean, the West Midlands is wider than the 7 Mets. There's lots of assets outside the 7 Mets that are important, as well as inside. And I think it's I was not quite sure about paragraph 624 about service level agreement. But quite frankly, I'm not particularly interested in agreement. What I'm interested in is a strategy plan, a strategy or work plan and targets for individual local authorities. And I'm assuming that will come out of the work that is developed with each local authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? I don't see any indications. Sorry, yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, very quickly, if I may. Looking through the report, it refers to more hotel accommodation and nighttime economy in the report. There are certain things where we do have nighttime economy, not always taken into account. In the Dudley area, we tend to have quite a lot of visitors because we've got a lot of microbreweries and places of that nature that attract people in. I know that those two former councillors from Wolverhampton used to make regular visits to Dudley to visit these establishments. So the other thing that seems to be missing from here, in the Black Country, we're the same as the city of Birmingham, with a great, fantastic canal network, which in some places is not always used as efficiently as it should do, and it does attract visitors to come and use the canals into the area. And I think things like this, where people out there sort of get neglected over a number of years, should be taken into account. After all said and done, these microbreweries are businesses. They're consuming energy and paying the full cost for it, and they need to make a living to keep them open. And I think there's things like that we should bring into this report to, you know, encourage that type of enterprise within within the region. Thank you.
We'll note that. Speakers come back. Councillor Adrian Andrew, please, first.
Sorry, Chairman, I wanted to reiterate what Councillor Courts has said about those local priorities. With that situation, it will be down to the local authorities to set those priorities with the growth company, but also to manage those priorities as well. So the success or failure of the next steps will be in the hands of the local authorities.
Agreed. Paula, please. Paula Dennis.
Thanks, Councillor Slade. Just a comment really from me, just sort of in relation to obviously the previous items that we've discussed around the change of the architecture and the responsibilities around economic growth, investment, economic development, business interface. I'd just like to comment, I'm really pleased to see obviously a sort of good progress going towards the future of the growth company and its future role, well, its existing and future role. And just to reinforce the points made by Tom Wesley, really just, you know, we haven't got a great deal of time to wait. You know, we need to get on with it and reinforce what Tom Wesley said. So really pleased this will go forward.
Thanks for that. I need to move on from this report, but I've got two. I'm going to ask for Matt Hammond to make a comment. I think he wants to got his hand up, and I'll go back to Tim Johnson to see if he wants to sum up any points. So Matt, please.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for all the comments that have been made during the course of this discussion. I also wanted to add my thanks to, in his absence, to Councillor Ian Brookfield as well, and Tim, please do pass on likewise best wishes, as well as thanks to the team for having done this. I do just want to make just a couple of quick points, if I may, Councillor Slade. First of all, this is only an interim funding solution for the growth company. We're talking about a short-term fix here. And we have done that in the context of some economic headwinds, and in particular, as Katie has outlined, other than the core level of funding, it is in fact only really the opportunity to make an application potentially for some of the legacy funds that will see the growth company through the next short period of a couple of critical years. So I think there needs to be a recognition that actually without those legacy funds, the ask would be very different, and we then still do have to move to the fuller requirement. I think it's been pretty clear on balance. Secondly, that this opportunity to have this review, which we were asking for, has brought about some areas where there are clear aspirations on a number of different parties to the conversations to work much more closely together, including, for example, those in Walsall and Sandwell that we just heard from, both parts of the West Midlands that are home to many great businesses, large and small, and should be in the future as well, which is part of what the growth company is trying to do. But I think we need to, I do think we need to sit back and reflect on one question for the medium term, which is if we're ambitious as a region, and I think we are, then we need a properly funded growth company for the medium term. As many and various have already said, without it, those functions would have to be replicated possibly several times over, probably less economically efficiently so, and operationally effectively so, in different local authorities. But let's also not forget this is the only place in which essentially the local authorities, the combined authority, the universities and the private sector really come together to put the best foot forward for the region. And I'm grateful for the opportunity for us to have had this review, but it's really critical we need to move on to the medium-term sustainable funding piece.
Thank you, Matt. Before I put the recommendations, Tim, do you want to come back with any points?
Not particularly, Chair. I think points very well made by colleagues. As Matt's just said, I think, you know, we all want to move on to actually the delivery of the activity that will generate the benefit, the economic benefit for our places and communities, and I think that's what we're all looking forward to getting our sort of teeth into. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations are listed at page 27 and 28 in the report. I don't intend to read them all out individually. Is everyone content that we take those forward? No indications otherwise, so we will do so on that basis as per the recommendations listed. Thank you. I'm then going to move on to Commonwealth Games Legacy Fund, Economy, Trade and Tourism pillar. The purpose of today, let's be clear, is not to decide on the funding for each programme, but to provide guidance about the overall mix of activity and agree to the process to address the remaining issues identified in the report. That's the purpose of today's report. I'm going to hand over to Julie.
Thanks, Councillor Slay. So just conscious of time as well, in terms of the process for getting here, clearly this follows on from the board decision to look at the Commonwealth Games Legacy funding across 4 different pillars. This one focuses on the economic piece, and within that 5 key areas. We could have spent this money several times over, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. So what we've tried to do is stay true to the commitment around the legacy programmes, but also our broader economic agenda. So these like plan for growth, so that we really are trying to tackle some of those underlying issues and really support progression. As Councillor Slay said, not really looking for people to unpick the details of each one, the broad areas there, but really hoping to get a steer from the board. Have we got the right direction of travel in terms of fees, and then in terms of managing the spend, because currently the programmes in here are oversubscribed, just to give us a steer on what's the best way of doing that. So happy to take any questions or points of clarification, but also keen that we get a steer on how best to manage the over subscription at this point.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you. A number of issues with this particular report, and I note what you both said about not unpicking the numbers here, but I have to say it's not clear to me how these numbers have been arrived at for each of these pillars. And unless there's some logic and cast iron argument that arrives at a position that it has to be 38.9, 20.8, 4.07 and 4.07. I think the leaders, the Met leaders and the Mayor in a meeting outside of this ought to be able to vie between these numbers, because that would be very helpful in respect of one of the items that is in the table. I think the starting point has got to be that whatever's supported here out of this underspend should be able to demonstrably link itself back to the legacy ambitions as set out in the legacy framework for the games. And some of these items, not just in this paper, but in papers going elsewhere under these other pillars, do not do that. And so if you look at the table that is on page 53, there are 2 items in here that I cannot see are related to legacy from the games. They are good and justifiable things to be funding and things to be doing, but they are not legacy from the game. So in the table, item 2, delivering on plan for growth and support for high growth regional businesses. Yes, there should be support for that, but I would have thought the UK Shared Prosperity Fund would be the route to fund that, not legacy funding from the games, because it's not strictly legacy. And similar with item 5, the wider jobs and skills are legacy. Yes, we should be doing it, but the CA gets funding not just from UK Shared Prosperity Fund, it also gets funding related to further and skills and education money, and that's where this should be coming from. If you remove those 2 items, you then get the asks more in line with the available amount of money that's flagged up on the in paragraph 2.3 of 38.9 million. The one thing that's missing, of course, from that list that is definitely legacy for the games is the request of the aquatics facility in Sandwell, and that really has to be moved into this programme. I can't see how, as a group of Met leaders, we can support that. A legacy element from these from the games that didn't support the aquatic centre going forward. I forget the number now. Peter might well know it, but it's in excess of 70 million, I think, being invested there. It will be throwing away good money not to support that going forward. And then on the remaining items that are left there, I cannot see or make the argument that these are then legacy items. I mentioned earlier the investment in the West Midlands Growth Company. I think you justify that on the success of the business and tourism programme. Want to see more of that in the future. Want to see more investment attracted into the region. Perfectly comfortable with the major events line. We may go on to have some discussions about how that money gets spent, but it seems to me in principle to be a legacy from the games. And then item 4, which is the European Athletics Championships. This is where I think we are, well, it comes back to how you justify these numbers that are in paragraph 2.3, because I don't see there's any need to split the ASCII, which is 13.7 million, between two of these pillars. Let's just wire over 2 million out of the Communities Fund, because when we do get to a point where we're debating what's in that Communities pillar, I mean, I do have some very, very large concerns about what's being proposed in that. I know that's not a matter for this meeting, but I do have some concerns. So I do think that 2 million should be wired across here in order that we can fully support the European Athletics Championships. It is supported by DCMS as a legacy from the Games. They've made that very clear in conversations I've had with officials from DCMS. Off the back of those assurances, Birmingham put forward its bid, which we had to do last year in November. I mean, I'm delighted that the bid has been successful. It'll bring another major sporting event to the region and put us again on that international platform. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the United Kingdom has never before hosted this event. It is a key event for us to be hosting. 2026 will be a major year again in the city and the wider region as a result of us hosting that event. We've got to have the money not just to put it on. It's, for me, very much like the Commonwealth Games. There's a proposal during the lead up to the Commonwealth Games as how we went from good to great. And I see this money as making sure we don't just stage an event, we stage the best ever European Athletics Championships in 2026. So it's important that these things are agreed, but I can't agree to items 2 and 5 because they're not genuine legacy from the Games, in my view.
Just a couple of points. The paper's been prepared following the decision of the board. So that's why we are where we are with the table 2.3 and those sums that are assigned. So just think that needs to be noted, that that's why we're doing the paper today. It is the decision of the board on the 16th of December to agree that.
Well, that's probably fair comment actually from you, Bob. My point would be that there is a meeting coming up Friday of next week when we're going to have further discussions on this, and I don't think these numbers can be set in stone because I don't think if I pushed anybody could justify why the numbers are the numbers.
And I think on that point, with regard to the Sandwell proposal, I think we will note that, and that is a subject of conversation that will be held at that particular meeting to see, because it's currently outside of any indicative programme, as you quite rightly point out. So that will be a matter of discussion on the 3rd. So, do you want to comment, Julie?
Just a further point of clarification, as Councillor Slay said, those pillars and the amount were agreed at the board and the broad areas that sat underneath them, so including things like the jobs and skills piece. And again, I should have clarified, the activities that are included can't be funded from anywhere else. So, for example, work on careers or employment support isn't fundable from any of our existing skills programmes.
Maybe not, but currently negotiations going on with the government about supposedly what I'm assured will be a trailblazing devolution deal. I'm concerned here that we are starting to fund things that are just not genuinely legacy from the Games. This programme is over subscribed to. If you take out 2 and 5, you get back down within the number that you keep reminding me was agreed in December. That is what needs to happen here in order that we can demonstrate both to DCMS and to the public out there that we're spending the underspend from the Games on things that are genuinely legacy from the Games.
We'll note that, absolutely. Just give me a second, yeah. I'll take Ian Courts next, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, you may have sort of answered almost what I was going to say, but I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest, by the way this conversation is going, because I did think that the pillars have been agreed, and there may be, and therefore we were starting from there. But if there isn't, I mean, let's look at the 5 items. Item 5, the unemployment, the employment support there. If there isn't funding elsewhere, I think it's quite reasonable to look at this for funding it. I mean, the growth company is included within this. Okay, it had involvement with the massive involvement with the Commonwealth Games, but that isn't the only reason for the funding going there. And I personally, I support what's been said for the inclusion of 5. I would actually go further, because there are a number of employment support programs going on in different local authorities, and I'd like to see the actual 6 million passported down to local authorities to apply. But I thought this was agreed, and I think that I know we've got an issue of where the money, that it's over the top of what we've got, or the requests are over the top. But I think five stays, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you for that, Ian. Councillor Hughes, please.
Well, I have to say that I fully support Councillor Ward's reservations on the allocation of the funding to these different pillars. I see legacy in a different way to what's being proposed. So I would fully support the points he's making. And I'd like to thank him for supporting Sandwell in terms of suggesting that the utility pressures that we will be experiencing in relation to the aquatic centre should be that the £2 million that we're talking about should be allocated from this fund. The aquatic centre was a major feature of the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, and at the end of the day, Sandwell put big money into that facility. We're experiencing a situation, yes, that every local authority is experiencing in terms of its leisure facilities, but this is an iconic facility that will serve the people of Sandwell and the West Midlands and wider for many, many years. And I thank him for putting that forward. If it can be minuted in any way, that is then taken as a decision by the board subsequently, I'd appreciate that. And vice versa, I would also support Councillor Ward of Birmingham in relation to the funding that's required to support the European Athletics Championships as well.
So just a couple of points. I can't take back what has already been decided by the board, and therefore the pillars are decided by the board and the funding has been allocated by the board. That would have to be a board decision if that were to be changed. I've made the point, and I think it is administered, that the issue with regard to the aquatic centre is not currently in the indicative programmes, but will be discussed at the meeting on the 3rd of March. So that's the best assurance I think I can give you at this point in time, notwithstanding the comments around the table. So I just want to get some clarity as to where we are. And Councillor Courts makes his point. Just to reiterate, we're not here to decide the funding for each programme. We're basically looking at the direction of travel to actually identify whether those programmes are the right programmes within their particular subsections. I think that's where we are. So I hope that that's taken as what we're trying to decide here today. Do you want to come back, Councillor Ward?
Yes, I do. Because however you want to justify this, Bob, it's not possible to spend money that we don't have. And this, as it's demonstrated in the table, is over the amount of money. The pillars that you keep telling me were agreed in the December board meeting. What I don't think was agreed in the December board meeting was that money would be spent that we don't have. So there's got to be some give in this, and we've got to reach agreement around it. So simply saying that we keep 5 in and try to spend 6 million we don't have cannot be the position we're going to end up in. If we're going to reach some agreement, I think we have to come back to a principle about what we're doing here. And surely that has to be what we've already agreed with DCMS, that the underspent monies will be spent in line with the legacy framework for the games. This is underspent money from that event. It has to be spent in line with legacy. And I think you can justify 3 of the 5 elements here. And I think then, actually, if you take out 2 and 5, you can bring in the 2 million for the aquatic centre, and then we're in line with the available amount of money. Surely that's what we have to agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2.12 does indicate what we're actually trying to do here. But I'll give you a comment.
Yeah, I think the other thing to clarify is that we haven't yet had confirmation from DCMS in terms of the exact nature of what they're expecting to see in here. But what we've tried to do is to cover it in terms of the themes identified in the board paper, recognising it's oversubscribed, but also that we have to go through some quite detailed business cases where the cost for each of these will be scrutinised as you would expect. So at this stage, we were saying there are a number of options. We can underpin the broad priorities, recognising it's over-programmed, but these things often have a habit of coming down as you get into the detail, and we'd be looking at shared prosperity fund as well to see if they maximise those. We could look at reducing all of them by an element, or we could, as people have suggested, take out one or two of those. I think within that, we just need to be clear that the impact of that in terms of some of our broader legacy ambitions as well.
But on your particular point, I think what it does say within the recommendations at 4, provide direction on the preferred approach to addressing the current over programming across the pillars. So I think that is a matter for debate, as it says within the paper. So I think that is covered in that particular area. So it's not finally concluded at this point in time. We are agreeing that that will be ongoing.
Yeah, and whilst you might not have had inclusive discussions with DCMS, you have been written to on the 15th of December with an indication from DCMS that this money needs to be spent to enhance the legacy of the games. Therefore, you've got to spend the money in line with the legacy framework. Otherwise, how is it related to the legacy of the games? Let's be honest. You could make up a list to spend this money on anything.
I mean, it's a point noted, Ian. We're very constrained as to what we can do. I think that came out in the board discussion because of the governance arrangements that are required of us to utilise the funding. So I think that point has been made and made previously.
Can I ask you then, Bob, what's the next step in this? Because clearly at the moment there's not agreement on this. So clearly at the moment there is not agreement on this. So what is the next step? Is it to take it into the meeting on Friday of next week and to hammer this out there?
I think that's exactly what the outcome is. Okay, fine. Councillor Hughes, please.
I know it sounds as though I'm trying to nail something to the last, but my understanding was that the funding in relation to the Sandwell Aquatic Centre of £2 million was actually discussed at a meeting on the 19th of January. And we can't understand why it hasn't been then included in this report.
No, I can't confirm that.
Just to clarify, so we are aware that Councillor Carmichael has written to the Mayor with that issue, and I think as the paper notes, we recognise it needs to be found. I think what we're saying at this point is it hasn't been agreed where that comes from. It doesn't fit with the economic theme as it stands, but there are 3 other pillars. So I don't think the issue is we've said no to that. It's just where it comes from within the scope of the whole programme. As Councillor Ward said, that is part of the discussion for Friday, where and how that would be funded, rather than it coming out of the economy thing. It needs to be, for example, out of the inclusive communities or sports. And
so there's an acceptance in principle that it should be funded, but not.
I think there's acceptance that has been an ask, which will be discussed on the 3rd of March. That's, I think, where we are. Did you want that?
I think an ask is between is it less than an agreement. Yeah, okay.
The only thing I was to add to that, Chair, is that all local authorities were invited to make submissions in relation to these discussions. So I just want to make it clear to everybody who may not know the detail that we submitted this issue on the 19th of January in writing with some detail. It's not something which has just suddenly cropped up in the last few days, but following the process of inviting those submissions. So I guess what we're a little bit puzzled about is some things have been reflected in the report in front of us, but other things have not, and that's the bit probably needs teasing out.
And that, again, that's very helpful. So can we move on with the paper? And one more point, please.
Just a very quick ask, and thank you to the officers and members that have been supportive throughout this process. The sequencing as to what comes next, next steps, and the business cases through the SAF process. That there is alignment, and they do work. I know everybody would recognise there is the spending review restraints in terms of when the money ultimately needs to be out of the door. I think all local authorities and all organisations want to see that money best spent. So that sequencing and clarity of that, so we can pull together the relevant business cases to present the information necessary for the board to be re-helpful.
That's will be dealt with. Yeah. Councillor Courts, please.
Yeah, just to say, I mean, we're going to have this discussion, I think we could do with some advice on exactly what is embraced within the spirit of the legacy, because, you know, you look at all 4 pillars and you say, well, are they all related to the legacy, or are we being selective here? So I think we need some further advice on this. I mean, inclusive communities, for example, I mean, how much of that is actually related to legacy?
Thanks, Ian. I just asked Julie to finally comment.
Yeah, I think one of both the opportunities but also the risks or challenges of this process is it's being very much left to the region to determine what and how this funding is spent. I think it feels like the conversation that will take place with Merrimack leaders will be an opportunity to look at the whole and not just in one pillar, because it does feel like a number of the issues raised cut across more than just the economy pillar. So it feels like we can reflect back views of this meeting, but it's that broader conversation.
I've got to go because I've got a 4 o'clock meeting, so I don't want to extend this at all. But to be clear, I don't have a problem with the title of the pillars. It's what then is positioned within those pillars. And as I've said, it's not just this one. I just cannot see those 2 items on legacy. But when the other propositions come forward, I've seen the report and I've got a number of problems with those as well. And so to answer Ian's question, it's not the pillars bit, it's what's been shoved in underneath them.
Okay, I think we'll note at that point, and we'll take the
everything.
Paper is noted at page 49. Fine. Sorry, I didn't say the recommendations are noted at page 49. Councillor Ward, you're leaving. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a 4 o'clock meeting.
Okay.
That's there late for.
Okay, continuing with the agenda, UK Chairs Prosperity Fund spend local allocations. Claire Hatton, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief given time. Paper outlines just the forecast position for year 1 spend on both the communities and place pillar and the business support. So if I take the communities and place pillar first of all, local authorities have done fantastic work and are projecting to spend all of their year 1 allocation on communities in place, which is good. So asking the board to note that and to note that we continue on that flight path for the rest of the year. And also we have set out in the paper options that if there is any underspend on the communities in place, that it will be decided how that is addressed between the FDs from each local authority alongside economic, alongside Julie and Linda Horn, our one officer, and they will take that decision on how to do that. So, but we are confident, and feedback is that will be spent, so that should all work through. We are on with looking at year 2 now for communities in place, working with local authorities, making sure we've got all the profiles so they've got a whole year to go out to spend that. So that's progressing well. On business support, given the timescales and the money, the money will not all be spent in year 1. So whilst we have gone out to procure for some of the specialist support programs, and that's in process, that money will not be defrayed in year. So we are asking the board for authority to go ahead and submit a credible plan to carry that money over. We have discussed this with FDs from local authorities who are supportive. The risk being, and to note that we haven't yet had the guidance on what a credible plan is from government. We do expect that we would meet the conditions of that, but there is a little risk with that we don't know what that is yet. So those are the asks and the recommendations. I'm happy to take any questions on that. Sorry for the brevity.
Report has been tabled. Any questions? Councillor Hughes.
I think that one of the major flaws in this is the extent to which the monitoring of outputs and outcomes has been thrown to the local authority. We have lost our LEP function and also the Black Country Growth Hub that would have supported us in this. And, you know, as part of the process that we're being expected to undertake, I think that we feel that the combined authority should be supporting us with it. It's a feeling of the boat being on the other foot, and we're being expected to do more with less. So, you know, that's a concern that we have. The other thing is, but a part of the ask is in relation to productivity, and I think our officers in particular have concerns as to how we're going to evidence productivity in the short time scale of this particular programme. And can we have confirmed that the methodology the government is expected us to use to evidence that? I think there's a few problems involved in what we're being expected to do here.
Okay, thank you. Probably something I can take offline with officers outside of the meeting rather than go through all of that now. But we haven't got any methodology from government about productivity at the moment, but can certainly take those up outside if that's okay.
Chair, we'd like to think that there was support in relation to the outputs and outcomes. As I say, a lot of our backup support is now going as of the 31st of March. So can we please get that type of support from the Combined Authority?
I'm going to push back to Julie.
So, and again, happy to pick the detail of outside, but just to confirm that local authorities also get the same top slice of admin support for this that we're getting. It is set at 4%, it's not a lot. But then also the business support element includes a number of local posts that will go where it used to be in the growth hub. It will transfer to the local authority to have that resource. So very happy to pick that up in the conversation, but we're trying to make sure that the resource follows the work, and that does include quite a lot of the posts going out to local authorities. So happy to pick that up in that slide.
Anyone else? Before we take the recommendations, no indications on the screen, no indications in the room. They're listed at page 59 with an agreement to delegate authority, the approach decisions in year one and dispense the Executive Director of Economic Delivery, Skills and Communities, and the Economic Director of Finance and Business Hub in consultation with West Midlands Finance Director. You're content with that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Two more reports. We UK Share Prosperity Fund Business Support of the West Midlands. Paul, please. Thank you.
Sequel Chair on business support, and in the interest of time, I'll just pick up 4 quick items rather than go through the paper in detail. First of all, really to thank all local authority officers and the growth hubs for their ongoing hard work and support. Really, I'm just the front man for all of this, and officers across all 7 local authorities are doing really sterling work. And particularly in relation to paragraph 3.1 in the paper, which are the 4 things they can growth ambassadors to deliver on collectively. And I'm pleased to give the board some comfort that at least 3 of those are big ticks at the moment, which is 1, having an integrated offer, 2, having a consistent offer, and 3, having the regional added value programme. So 2 of the programmes have gone out already and are procurement as we speak. I'd also choose to highlight where we've made progress against the agreed working principles. And again, thanks to all local authorities officers for this, which is the agreed working principles of local delivery within a regional framework. And there's a lot of work being done and agreed at what will sit at a local level, and all 7 local authority officers have agreed to that. So really grateful for the hard work officers have done around that. So thank you again. And then 5.1 highlights the 2 commission programmes that have gone out, and those are, just for clarity's sake, the only 2 regionally commissioned programmes that will be deliverable in the UK SPF unless there is future underspend. That's a real canter in just time, but happy to take questions.
Reporter for noting. Are there any questions to Paul? Not indicated, we therefore note. And the final paper today is in essence the Growth Board Work Programme. Again, just for noting, does anyone want to speak to it? No, I think we're just taking it to note. A little bit later than we thought, but I closed the meeting at that point.
Yeah, I think so.